So this program, it will be recorded. It is being recorded as of now, and it will be available for anybody to watch. You can watch it as many times as you want. And you can share it with other people, and we'll post those links up on our Facebook page and on our webpage.
Hey,
all right, so
never mind.
Scott Coburg, can you did you figure out how to be able to share, talk and unmute yourself and everything?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Can you hear me now, Liz?
Oh yeah, awesome, perfect. All right, so you've got it dialed in. We'll look forward to hearing more from you in just a few minutes. All right, let's see. I have probably had enough chance. I'm gonna stop. Oops, what happened? I'm sharing the poll results. Well, I didn't. I must have hit the stop the polling by accident. Oh, look at that! I did. I'm gonna relaunch the polling because not very many of you got to do it because I must have hit the wrong button. All right. Here we go. Go ahead, everybody, do it again. If you already did it once, do it again because it erased all the things. Here's the polling. Which of these trees is a native to the Treasure Valley? How did you find out about today's program? And are you a member of BREN? And have you attended one of our programs before? There you go. Thank you. We'll take a couple minutes with that. Or a minute. Oh yeah, Oliver. Yeah. I must have hit when who knows. The mysteries of Zoom. Oh, I see. About 9 people voted. All right, here's the results. Seems to have a mind of its own. 9 out of 9 are saying that the black cottonwood is a native to the Treasure Valley. You are right. And the peach leaf willow is the only other one on that list that is a native to the Treasure Valley. And nobody voted for Russian olive, so that's really awesome. And a lot of people heard about this through our BREN email, and many of you are already members of BREN, so that's super awesome. And welcome to those of you who haven't come to our program before. Over half of you haven't. All right, stopping the sharing of the results. Polling is closed. Goodbye, polling, please. Okay, let me get rid of the poll. There we go. All right, I'm going to try one thing since this is the experimental time. So if you're still joining the meeting, make sure you use the chat box to say hello. And I'm going to get us in the mood here for this, if I can make this work right. And get another share up here. And got a lot of different things coming around on my screen. Oh, now my cat is coming. So those of you who are here, we got a little start on the
Project BREN. We got Golden Eagle involved. They were fun to watch. Scott, Coburg, and County Parks and Waterways. Here's the money.
All right, we're back. All right, so hopefully that got you in a little bit of the mood here. Let me, we're going to start our real program now. There's the Western screech owl that got rescued out of the site there. And here's our partners for this project: Boise River Enhancement Network, Golden Eagle Audubon Society, Ada County Parks and Waterways, and Ada County itself. Hey, Pat, I think the audio was a little bit low on the video, but hopefully you can hear better now. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike Hamza, who's the chair of the Boise River Enhancement Network coordinating team. Take it.
Hi there. This is Mike Hamza. As Liz said, I'm involved. I'm the chairperson of the coordinating team. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. This is one of the this is one of the silver linings of the cloud of the coronavirus here, I think, is that we're all expanding our skills and learning Zoom and so forth. And I would like to start off also by thanking you, Liz, Paul, for organizing this Zoom meeting and figuring all this stuff out. And thanks for the quiz there too. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy, and your thoughts are with us, and hopefully we'll get back to normal soon. So here we've got some upcoming presentations. We had a whole bunch lined up, but obviously we had to stay away from all the hand-holding type stuff. So next week we've got Chris Colson with Ducks Unlimited, and Chris will be speaking about restoring wetlands and ponds in the Treasure Valley and elsewhere on private property to enhance the birds and the Pacific flyway. And then also on May 30th, we are partnered with Odell Brewery, and they have got a Make It Pretty river cleanup, and we've got a bunch of different teams that will be going up and down the Boise River, and you can sign up if you care to clean up. And there's also beer involved, as I understand it. And if you go to our webpage, you can sign up there. And also, if you're not a member of BREN, I'd be surprised on how you got this far. But if you're not, go to our webpage and sign up, and you'll, as we add more programs like this, we can, keep you apprised of what's coming on. And then also, Liz, there we go. Also, I'd like to remind everybody that BREN is a nonprofit, and we are always in need of some money to keep programs like this and everything that we do going. So we would like you to, if you can at all, participate in the Idaho Gives. We're only at about 15% of our goal for this year. And we know that everybody's got, their needs for their nonprofits, but we can certainly use your help and help us keep presenting this and all the great stuff that BREN does. So, and with that, I'd like to just quickly introduce, we've got 3 speakers today. We've got Scott Coburg from Ada County Parks and Waterways. Scott's the director there. And I'd like to ask Scott and our other 2, as you start speaking, if you can just give us, 15, 20, 30 seconds of who you are and what you do. So we've got Scott Coburg. We've got also Dr. Roger Rosentreter, and Alan Crockett will be our speakers. So with that, I'm just going to let folks, let these 3, I think Scott's going to start off.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. So yes, my name is Scott Coburg, and as you mentioned, I'm the director of Ada County Parks and Waterways. This is primarily going to be Alan and Roger's show, I believe. But I will tell you a little bit about Parks and Waterways. We are responsible for management of several different park, trail, open space, pathway, waterways facilities in Ada County. One of those is Barber Park. Barber Park is what I would refer to as our flagship park facility. in our portfolio of property management. Here in Barber Park, a lot of folks, that's great. A lot of folks are familiar with kind of this map that you see with the aerial overhead view of Barber Park. We manage about 70 acres in total between Eckert Road and East Park Center. And the majority of the property is actually what is more native upland and riparian habitat you see from that aerial image. There are landscaped portions of the park and improved areas of the park, including the Barber Park Education and Event Center and all the amenities and parking that we offer for the float season, which we also manage. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. Barber Park is a tremendous park facility here in Ada County. It offers a lot in terms of flood attenuation and habitat, and also a really large contiguous black cottonwood forest that is sort of aging out and was formerly becoming a bit overrun with some invasive species. And that's where Alan's proposal and Alan and Roger and the rest of the crew involved in this project come in. And I think that's all I'll share for now. Unless there's any questions, I'll turn it over to Alan and Roger.
This is Roger. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Alan, do you want to say a few words first and go for it?
Well, I've been working as a weed warrior along the Boise River Greenbelt, particularly the Bethune Church River Trail. And a year ago or so, I was faced with a problem that we had all these invasive species along the trail. They were big trees that I couldn't take care of. And so working with the city of Boise, we ended up with 3 sawyers working for a couple of days, and they traveled about 0.6 of a mile down the Bethune Church River Trail, which is just downstream of Barber Park. And they chainsawed these things out for a couple of days, and we poisoned all the stumps. And Martha Brabeck was doing that part of it for the city. And I thought, geez, this is nice if we could extend this a little further and get some publicity so we do more of this thing later. And the reason for doing this was people don't realize that the Greenbelt is changing. And so far, there are at least 120 invasive species that are non-native species that are occupying the Greenbelt. And oh, there's me as Fess Parker. Anyway, Russian olives were kind of taking over, and my thoughts were, if we don't do something about it in the near term, it's going to get worse. And no one seems to see the changes that take place from year to year or 5 year to 5 year. But in the long run, the Boise River is not going to be running through the habitat it's got right now. Think of the Colorado River. And once upon a time, it was a riparian river flowing through black cottonwoods that all got replaced by tamarisk. And so the forests, so the national parks are trying to get rid of them now. The same thing could happen in Boise. So that's where this started. And we thought, geez, if we could do the same thing in Barber Park, maybe we get some publicity out of it, articles in the newspaper, gets a media event. And well, we ended up removing these species, these trees that we found as being invasive, particularly Russian olives and Callery pear and Siberian elms, and a few silver maples. And there's some good reasons for doing this. I think Roger will jump in and talk about why we ended up doing this. I ended up marking something like 600 trees to be removed, and we ended up accomplishing that. And I think for the longer run, we probably got superseded by COVID-19, and so our bang for our buck didn't happen, and we didn't get the outreach we might have liked, but we still got rid of the trees. So let me turn it over to Roger.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about why we were doing that and what kind of results we had. And I want to mention that you can tell this is mid-February. It's cold out. It's nice and sunny, but you're wearing heavy jackets, and you notice that the trees have not leafed out yet. So it makes it a little challenging to even identify some of the trees. And, you know, so what's so bad about these invasive trees? I find this often. I'm cutting down something like a mulberry tree or something, and people think, oh, what's wrong? Trees, and in our climate, anything that provides shade has some benefits, and we recognize that shade is nice and all that, but you're basically, with these invasive species, replacing spatially trees that could provide a lot better wildlife habitat, a lot better insects, and all songbirds need that high protein of insects to raise their young. So this little twig here in the picture is a Russian olive. They have thorns, so people who deal with them are familiar with them, that the thorns aren't much fun. But when you take a closer look at them, super macroscopically, they're nice fuzzy little hairs on them. But these hairs in a scanning EM picture here, you see how dense those hairs are, and they deter herbivory. This is a little close-up of them. Every hair that's what I call stellate hair. It's like an umbrella. And insects don't like these. They didn't evolve. There's a few insects in Asia that have evolved. Most insects are actually species specific. They evolved to eat one type of plant. It might be at the genus level, but they're very specific. Insects, something like 85% of insects are very specific plant herbivores. And so we just don't have the insects that eat Russian olive leaves. So a comparison is something like the Melaleuca tree in Australia. In its native habitat, it has 409 species of insects. In North America, they grow these things like in warmer climates, like in California. And this is a photo from Brookings, California, or Brookings, Oregon, probably just over the border. And they only get eight species of insects on them. And most of those type of insects are more the generalist type insects that some people consider the less desirable, less beneficial insects. But all these invasive species, when those leaves fall in the river, the native aquatic insects that are eaten by trout are ignored. They're not utilized. They don't become food. And so once we cut down these trees, we treat them so they don't resprout. And that's a key factor, because most of these species have very few natural enemies and resprout. And it's a massive job. This is hard for Alan, and I got started on this with some of Harris Ranch area 2 years ago, and we on our own cut down hundreds of smaller Russian olives with mostly hand saws, loppers, and some chainsawing. But these really big trees they are a real chore, and this stump needs to be treated or it'll just resprout. Here's an example of a resprouting cottonwood. And So we were lucky enough with coordination with the Ada County weed, pest, and mosquito abatement folks, which Scott helped organize, treated the stumps to prevent this regrowth, just like this stump. Of course, we didn't cut down cottonwoods, but I didn't have a good picture of a Russian olive resprouting, so this is what you get. And these are the workers or the crew. We wore some of these vests partly so we'd see each other in the brush, so the sawyers didn't drop trees on us. Makes us, that would be a little bit irritating. But most of this is the mosquito abatement guys that would come in after the sawyers dropped the trees. And me and Alan mostly marked trees and use these loppers and that to get rid of lower branches, pull the trees away as the sawyers cut them down. But removing these invasive trees will open it up for the native black cottonwoods, willows, the native willows, which there's many species of, and there's a few exotic to our valley, like the weeping willow. But weeping willow is so closely related to our natives that it gets a lot of native insects that utilize it. So, so not all these invasives do we go after, just like the trees that we listed in our poll. If we get catalpas and some of these silver maples, they're not as desirable, but we don't go after them as bad as we do the exotics that get no or very few insects on them. Basically, a lot of you already know this, and Audubon people are big on this, is you need the native plants to get the native insects. And all young songbirds need insects to mature quickly. Insects have 10 times the protein of red meat. That's how these birds can mature so quickly. And if you think about it, in lots of nature, whether you're studying sage grouse or whatever, a lot of the energy and trophic levels is passed from one trophic level to the next by insects. So I like to think of insects as the dollar bills of nature. And since most insects have evolved on specific trees and shrubs, you need to have the right kind of native plants to encourage the native insects. This extends into our aquatic habitat, and fishermen are really quite good at trying to match their imitation flies to the actual native aquatic insects. And many of these aquatic insects shred leaves and eat these leaves as part of their food source. So the more aquatic insects that are fed by native leaves, the better for the fish in the Boise River. So this fish and this fisher person love native trees and shrubs. And it really helps promote not only songbirds and the whole interdependent parts of nature, but even into the aquatic ecosystem. So if you want to catch fish in the Boise River, you can help us promote native trees. Many different songbirds have specific insects or types of things they eat. So having that diversity and keeping, like willows have over 400 species of insects that eat willows. But then you put a Russian olive there and you only have, 2 or 3 species of insects that ever eat it. And same with many other things like mulberries. People think mulberries are great because the female trees, which there's very few female trees compared to male trees, but every part of a mulberry tree is poisonous and is not eaten by herbivores. And so you really decrease your year-round food and the life cycle, the food web of birds if you have mulberries. So we worked, I was not aware how much area really was Barber Park. We worked down in this lower skinny section, and you know, it was a lot of people know this part of Barber Park, but there was a lot of work down in this lower skinny section. And you know, as trees, invasive trees come in, it's like a slow growth. It happens slowly. And you know, it's kind of like neglect to let these invasive plants and trees take over. And even though, why do we have so many on the Boise River? Well, one reason is that most of the native beavers and deer love to eat the cottonwood trees and willows along the river. So if you're weeding out the cottonwoods, you get more of the other species, the exotic species. So beaver don't like Russian olives either. They'll eat them, they'll chop them down occasionally because all rodents have to chew. They have that tendency, their front teeth are always growing, so they gnaw on things. But for bark, beavers like to eat about 2 pounds of bark a day, the inner bark of trees or shrubs. And they strip the willows. They eat the golden willows before they eat the coyote willows. And they eat the black cottonwoods before they eat any of the alder or any other shrubs that are on the river, like the river birch. They will eat the river birch sometimes, but usually when they're hard up. You can find that beaver and deer eat the young cottonwoods. And we probably, besides getting rid of the exotics, we probably need to cage more of the cottonwoods that we want to reestablish on the Boise River, because you never notice the small cottonwood trees that beaver eat. It's really amazing how many beaver are on the Boise River. Even the deer, unplanted ones, we've seen where the city has planted new seedlings of shrubs. The deer can be a very major herbivore on those species. And all those native herbivores and exotic animals like goats, cows, livestock grazing of any sort tends to encourage the exotics that don't taste as good and don't have as palatable. In particular, you can find that, like, horses are really hard on riparian systems because horses like to browse more than they like to eat grass, really. So with that, kind of making it, any questions for me or for other people, Scott or Alan?
Yeah, just to chime in, this is Scott again, and I appreciate what you put together, Roger. And can you still hear me?
Can.
I had a chance to review it ahead of time. I just wanted to respectfully disagree on one item there, and it was what you mentioned as far as its neglect to allow invasives to take over, specifically related to public land management. It's more of a matter of operational priority, capacity, and budgeting, which is why it was beneficial to partner and collaborate externally with Golden Eagle Audubon Society and folks to bring this project to fruition. So I just wanted to clarify that it's not for lack of want or desire or neglect. There's a lot of other parts and pieces that go into where the county and other jurisdictions might allocate resources, personnel, funding, and otherwise.
So maybe it'd be better to categorize as it becomes a lower priority, and then and I really thank you for getting on it and coordinating on this project. It's really hard even with weed control to have a maintenance program that that addresses all those issues. You know, I realize every management agency has that challenge.
This is Liz, and we do have a question, and you know, I just want to second the thanks to Ada County. The commissioners gave this a thumbs up, and Scott's crew was out there during all these days and in the run up to this to get this project ready. So it really was quite an effort on behalf of the county, and we're really excited that the current county commissioners we're behind this. And so Oliver asked a great question about replanting. So what's going to happen now out there? Is there going to be some replanting so that these invasives don't just take up this empty space again?
I think I'll just chime in real quick. This is Scott again, and I'll allow others to chime in as well. You know, it seems as the next logical and feasible step is to get some piezometers installed or potentially determine where the water availability is on these upland areas of Barber Park in order to determine the efficacy and appropriateness of specific plantings and locations and specific species of plantings. But ultimately, yes, that's our goal, is not just to eliminate invasives, but to then begin to restore and regenerate native species in Barber Park and these upland native plant areas. But yeah, it's important not to just, you know, throw a bunch of resources into sticking plants in the ground if we don't already know what type of water availability we have.
This is Roger. To add to that, most of these areas are not that degraded that there's not a neighboring small cottonwood tree or a clump of willows that can kind of fill in. So we're hoping that a lot of those areas would just, the neighboring native trees will fill in those areas. And again, you know, I agree with Scott that some of the barren areas, you don't know whether you really have enough water to support cottonwoods given today's water management and regime from the river. But many areas where there are cottonwoods, we probably need a little bit of effort on caging the desirable cottonwood trees so that you space it out and have some caged and some uncaged, so that you kind of can, particularly with clumps of golden willows, they can really devastate and take out the golden willows over the other coyote willows in the river system. And they're not as sought after or favored by wildlife. And so you can actually lose golden willows from many river systems. We see this a lot on Bureau land management lands that get overgrazed. And so caging them, even if you just put a cage around the bottom of the stumps, can keep them growing and how you say, keep the beaver from totally killing a shrub. And you know, same with overpopulation of deer. You know, it's a very, very difficult management situation to manage even deer herds in town like this. You can't just kind of open Barber Park up for fall hunting very easily. So the deer congregate in certain areas and can overgraze an area. So with that, I'll see if there's another question, Liz.
So I've got another question, and I want to remind people that if you do have a question, because you're all muted, if you can write it into the chat box. So this is a question I think Alan will be great to answer because he had personal contact with all of these trees. Alan, can you really run down what species of trees were taken down and you know, some approximation on how big, you know, were there a lot of ginormous ones? Were they mostly small? And then for those of us who aren't botanists, like how did those trees get there? I presume that somebody didn't go plant them out there in Barber Park. So I'll turn it over to you, Alan.
Well, Russian olive is one of the plants we're primarily interested in because its presence was rather extensive and it doesn't provide the habitat of other species. But Callery pear was another one, and probably all of you have one of these in your yard. They're also called Bradford pears. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture thought these were the greatest thing since sliced bread when they were first brought into the country. They thought no insects exist on them, but it could be better. For the horticulturalists, that's one thing, but for the people who want to create habitat, that's not so good. These Bradford pears were supposed to be sterile. Well, turns out that several varieties are brought in and they cross-pollinate, and all of a sudden they end up in the wild and they end up being reproducing. And no one seemed to know that they were in existence along the Boise River Green Belt till I pointed it out. And the infestation was not great. So we were able to take them all out along Bethune Church River Trail and in Barber Park as well. Siberian elms are another species that we brought in. They have cut it for lumber. It gets 50 to 70 feet tall. It's a tough plant. And it was probably brought in here by the settlers because it would grow, and it was, again, another tough plant. Russian olives also will grow in some of these really difficult circumstances where nothing else will grow. You get out to some of our parks, like Bruno Dunes, and geez, all they've got out there is Russian olive and tamarisk, and they're both kind of noxious plants, but if they didn't have those, they might have nothing. So those are the silver maple's another one. We took a few of them out when they started to get scattered out so it didn't spread. But those were the trees we were particularly after. But there are other things out there too that are invasive weeds. And the state has a responsibility, and the counties too, to remove noxious weeds. And the noxious weeds we have around here, like spotted knapweed and hound's tongue, Scotch thistle, poison hemlock, Canada thistle, etc. There's also these trees we're talking about, and there is no responsibility to remove those. They're invasive trees or species, and other ones include black locust, false indigo, dog rose, Himalayan blackberry, and as I mentioned, the silver maples, Siberian elms, Callaway pear. Those are all invasive species that are working against the habitat we'd like to have, but there is no responsibility statewide or anything else. No one's regulated those. So that's what we're trying to work on and get rid of these noxious as well as these invasive species. That help, Liz?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, thank you so much, Alan. So that's great. Roger, you've got a question. You'll have to go back to the map. Pat's asking, what's the area? If you can see that question. And then Louise also has a question. And I'm going to put up another poll while you guys are talking for people to do a little, another poll while we're going here. Oops. Okay, Roger, you gonna, answer that question?
What do you think of today's program? The
No, what's in the yellow dot? Pat Hedrick says, what's the area to the west of the park boundary, small yellow line?
right
So-
in there.
Yeah. So
Or-
that's the Wood Duck Island. This is Scott again. That's the Wood Duck Island Homeowners Association property and area that is under a bit of a different management plan, although similar, that was created in conjunction with the city of Boise and Idaho Department of Fish and Game when that neighborhood was developed. And they have similar management strategies. I believe they're also interested in moving forward with some invasive tree and species removal within that portion of their property. Unfortunately, we could not coordinate those efforts in front of this particular effort on county property, but that is what that is. It's also a wildlife habitat area. And there's a large heron rookery at the eastern end of that property as well. And the intent is to really not have public access within that area at any time, actually, in Barber Park on that trail along the river, which is the Greenbelt Pathway, the Greenbelt Trail, not the Greenbelt Pathway. We want folks to stay on the pathway and not go wandering through that habitat area and creating their own social trails.
This is Roger. I did want to maybe add too that, like, where did the Russian olives come from? And, you know, the birds are very good at eating those. Russian olives get a hard pit with a little foam covering that really doesn't amount to much food, but they do eat it. And then they spread them around. So birds will spread those. Birds will spread the pears and things like mulberries. And as Alan was talking about hybrids, a lot of the mulberries we have in the Idaho in general are a hybrid between the red and the white mulberry. And the red mulberry has an edible female fruit, but the white mulberry is not palatable to humans. And what we tend to have is a hybrid, and it's passed around by birds quite a bit. It needs a little extra water, so it tends to be a riparian species. And I think it's another species that gets around by birds and is pretty negative on the current riparian system. Also, some of these other species, the tree roots are not as good for stream bank stability. These other trees, compared to black cottonwood, do not produce cavities for birds or bats or any other wildlife species. So the whole system, the animals and plants, are adapted in Idaho riparian areas and really need each other, you know, and that Russian olives don't really fill those niches. So that's just additional comments on that first question about where did the Russian olives come from. That's it.
Thanks, Roger. We've got another question. What's the difference, you know, in we hear invasive plant and then we also hear noxious plant. Is there like some formal thing, or is that two names for the same thing?
Well, this is Roger. I'll take that on. Noxious is a particular category that the State Department of Agriculture makes and is usually related more to things that interfere with agricultural crops. While invasives there's a lot more invasive species, and they're usually categorized as plants from a different region or country, and it's a much broader category. And invasive things like cheatgrass is an invasive species, but is not on the noxious weed list. Just because noxious weed list species are legally mandated to be controlled by property owners. So they have a limited list. Any other questions?
And there's a question, what regrowth product did the abatement people use on these stumps? And I think you could also follow up on, you know, what is going to be the follow-up on how well it's been working. Go ahead, Roger.
Okay, I mostly they used I think it was a rodeo, which is a water near the riparian area glycophosphate chemical on the stumps. But as far as I know, they probably will follow up on that. Maybe Scott can tell us the schedule for it. But of course, with the virus, nothing has really been formally followed up on yet. But so we go back to look for resprouting. But that hasn't been done yet, as far as I know. Scott, do you have it? Know what the schedule is for that?
I don't have an updated schedule, Roger. We had Weed and Pest out here the day before yesterday, and they were doing some additional weed mapping. I don't believe they were including at this point in time any potential resprout for those cuttings. Again, you know, whether it's wrapping trees that are desirables or potentially following up on some of these resprouts, we, once again, Ada County, here in Barber Park, I think we'd welcome another proposal or maybe some collaboration with BREN or other volunteer groups or organizations that might have an interest in facilitating some follow-up from this project.
This is Alan Crockett. I might point out that the city of Boise is working to do the same kind of thing. And they used to have a program where you would pick up trash, you'd adopt a section of the greenbelt and pick up trash. Well, now they are requesting a lot more. Now you're responsible for taking care of wrapping up trees for beavers or planting new plants and removing noxious weeds, removing invasive species as well. And the Golden Eagle Audubon Society has adopted a section from Southeast 3.7 to Barber Park. And so we have been wiring trees, wiring shrubs, and we've been planting a lot of species. We're doing some experiments about getting black cottonwoods rooted through deep soils. That is not normally done, but it's a lot more work. And we've been banding or putting wire around a lot of the small trees, say 1 inch in diameter, and trying to protect those from the beaver. As you walk that section of the greenbelt, you'll see lots and lots of stumps where the beaver cut things down, and you end up with this bush coming off the top with 10 sprouts. In some of these cases, we've trimmed the excess sprouts off and trained for one, and hope we can get trees to be reestablished without having to start from scratch with seeds or planting something directly. And we put poles in the ground, actually 9 feet long, and they're starting to grow right now. Whether this is going to work in the long run, who knows, but it's pretty much a lot of work to dig a hole that's 6 feet deep to reach groundwater. So it's possible, and there are things to work on, but that's what we want to try and establish in the long run.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Scott. If you look into the chat, you can see that Scott has shared, you can share documents in the chat, and he's shared a photo of the wood, of what they call the wood duck sign. Do you want to just explain a little bit about that, Scott, please?
Sure, Liz. That was just kind of in follow-up to the question regarding that dashed yellow line. We did collaborate with the Homeowners Association, and I think I saw Michelle chime in here on the chat as well. So we've attempted to update some of the signage on either end of that property where the county's park property abuts the Homeowners Association property, and essentially indicate on that signage that's been posted now for a couple of years at either end of the pathway, which is the signage you see in the JPEG, that we are managing the area collaboratively for protection of crucial wildlife habitat and species. So that, in addition to flood control, that's just an example of the signage that is installed on site now. And we appreciate the collaboration with Fish and Game as well as Wood Duck Island to get that done. But that was just a little bit further explanation for folks of that area and the signage that's in place that educates, hopefully educates all folks passing by.
Thanks, Scott. And while you've got the microphone, why don't you just spend a few minutes as we start wrapping up here and talk about some of the other initiatives that Ada County has going on in regards to a healthy Boise River, both upstream and maybe downstream of Barber Park, please.
Sure, Liz. I'm not really sure how much I can offer, or maybe you have some other items you want to prompt me on there. But in terms of management of this property, Barber Park in particular, we experienced quite a bit of a learning on hands-on learning during the flood of 2017 in terms of flood attenuation and capacity to absorb flood flows here in Barber Park before the river kind of gets a bigger head of steam and heads into more populated areas of Boise. And I think, in large part, Barber Park is somewhat underutilized in that capacity. I think we have some areas here in the park that, potentially could see some stream channel restoration and connectivity of side channels for spawning and habitat, as well as flood flow and attenuation here in the park. And we're also aware, Roger mentioned he wasn't that familiar with how far downriver the county property of Barber Park extends beyond what's called the Bub diversion that you see, that little first diversion drop. Yep, thank you, Roger, on the river. And with the impacts that we see from recreational uses on the river related to the float season, there's that coupled with a lot of folks that like to throw sticks for their dogs from the river along the banks downstream from Bub. We are interested in seeing some stream bank restoration as well, as the flood caused some damage to already erosive stream banks that didn't have a lot of native vegetation holding those banks in place. And, we continue to see recreational impacts to those steeper banks. So there have been some proposed projects in the past. Nothing is really, for about 10 years, maybe 12 years now, been done. And we haven't done anything to follow up from the flood. But we're certainly interested. I know the county commissioners are interested in kind of embracing a little bit more proactive approach with items such as stream bank stabilization and flood control with Barber Park. Did that answer your kind of questions there, Liz, or did you want me to talk about something in particular?
Well, and then you have some property up around Barber Pool, and then you also have property at the Expo Idaho. Why don't you just, you don't have to go into any detail, but just remind people that it's more than just Barber Park, please.
Sure, yeah, I think you did that for me there. We do own about 35 acres in the Barber Pool Conservation Area. We are and have been for some time collaborating with the Idaho Foundation for Parks and Lands. I'm part of the Barber Pool Advisory Committee, and we are actually working on very similar signage to the signage I shared for to be placed along the greenbelt that we also manage along the Barber Pool, which is the area between Diversion Dam and roughly the Gregerson's property, or for those that aren't familiar, closer to Lucky 13 and the Shakespeare property and Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation. So we're going to be placing some additional signage to educate folks about the Barber Pool and that property that the county owns, along with the property that the foundation owns in the Barber Pool. Again, more conservation-oriented information and outreach there. And then you mentioned Expo Idaho. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 outbreak did kind of derail for the time being the Barber Pool Advisory Committee process. But yes, that riverside property of Expo Idaho, we're actually in a greenbelt construction project right now. But in terms of the whole property itself, there's quite a bit of discussion about how that potentially might be utilized differently to accommodate, higher river flow capacities, flooding, and things of that nature. So that's all yet to be determined, but it's certainly, Expo Idaho is certainly right there in the crosshairs, as well as another property in that case that could potentially have some positive impacts to Garden City residents if sort of modified to accept some additional flood flows or maybe a broader riparian corridor.
Thanks. That's perfect, Scott. Hey, this is your last chance. If you've got questions, you've got 3 experts here on the line today. We really appreciate everybody's patience with our Zoom, with the Zoom technology. We're glad that we can get together in this way, and hope that we will be able to hold some field trips into Barber Park this summer to look around and to actually talk about, look and see. And so those are definitely on our list to do as soon as it's safe for people to get out and about together. And we're going to have another great program next week, as Mike announced earlier, on waterfowl, and that's going to be focused heavily on activities in Canyon County and downstream on agricultural land. So that's next Friday at 11:30. And if there aren't any more questions, really appreciate everybody coming. And we'll give a big virtual round of applause to Roger Rosentreter, Alan Crockett, and Scott Coburg. Really appreciate you gentlemen presenting today, sharing with us this really, really first of its kind project in Barber Park. And as Scott said, hopefully we'll be able to work together to continue to enhance this property. There's a lot of space out there, and it'll take a little while to raise some money to do some things. I don't see anybody else typing in the box. Alan,
I might
Roger?
point out that there are a couple items that should be on the BREN webpage or site that they could look at too for if they're interested in this particular subject. There are things that I ended up writing. One was titled "The Future of the Boise River Greenbelt," and it was an op-ed piece that I wrote for the Statesman that has never been published, even though they accepted it in December. And there's one that was more specific. It's called "Invasive Trees in the Boise Green and Barber Park." So you might follow up on those if you liked what you saw today.
Oh, Alan, I'm so glad you said that, because I would have knocked myself on the head later. Yes, go to the BREN webpage. We've got those blogs. We have 2 other blogs about the Barber project itself, with a lot of other photos about the project. And if you go to our Facebook page, we have some other videos, which you'll be able to hear better than the video I showed today and forgot to share the audio part of it. And then the final question, Pat Hedrick says, where do I go to see possible plans for Expo and Garden City area? Well, I think you're just going to have to go into your own imagination right now, because there are no plans. Scott put up the link so you can get hooked in with the advisory committee, but it has not matured far enough to have any kind of written down plans. But that is definitely part of the process, that there will be public input, a lot of public input. Our current county commissioners for Ada County are very committed to a very open and transparent public process. On that note, look at that fine group of people that really worked hard to make sure that the trees got cut down and that all the stumps were treated carefully to minimize regrowth. And there's Alan and Roger there over on the right-hand side of it. And with that, thank you guys very much for coming. I'm going to end the meeting. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. That was awesome.